Welcome back to Talking Point. And joining me today, as I said, she will be here, is Dr. Faith P. Israel, here to speak to us about the issues on Tobago. And we had some interesting news coming out yesterday, just in time for the elections, maybe. So, interesting news. And I need to explain to our viewers, I'm a little bit sarcastic on this issue right now because I won't speak for Dr. B. Israel, but in my case, I have seen things like this before, and I have seen how things like this did not go anywhere, did not work, and in this instance, there are a lot of questions, and I'm sure Dr. B. Israel has a lot of questions on the nature of this announcement. Dr. B. Israel.
Yeah. Yes. Good morning. And, you may be sarcastic about it, but I am not even sarcastic about it because we have to really be concerned about how these things come about. And let me explain why. When we heard the announcement, and by we, I am including the 6 PDP assemblymen, we heard the announcement, what day was this week, that we are having this brand new hotel being built in an area that we are not even sure about on the island of Tobago. And half of the government of the Tobago House of Assembly knew nothing about it. Now, that in itself raises a lot of issues about the governance of the island. And, if this were a private thing, then sure, Marriott can do whatever Marriott wants, if it purchase their land or whatever. But we had a whole lot of politicians from the cabinet and the 6, if I am not mistaken, PNM assemblymen, which makes me think that there is some kind of government inclusion in this process. And this is a big part of the problem with how we do these kinds of projects, because it seems like other than the people who were in the room when the announcement was made, no one else, at least not in Tobago, knew about this project happening. So the questions are many. As soon as they started talking about the location, I had, for example, some of our historians, some of our naturalists, those people reaching out to me again saying, Faith, where is this? And I'm thinking, to be honest, I have no idea where this is. Somebody said, that might actually be an archaeological site that dates back to the 1600s that we need to preserve. Somebody else reached out to me and said, but isn't that where the turtles come up and nest and that kind of thing? Do we really want to do that kind of project in such an area? Now, granted, I am not sure because I am not even sure exactly where the hotel would be. We have other questions. Exactly who is doing what? Why was this a government announcement? Is it that what is the government's part in the, how much information or how much resources is the government putting into this project? Is this going to be another Hilton, another, whatever? We know the track record of how these government funded hotels go. Who is doing what? And even if the project is simply one where the land was given or sold or leased, because we don't know, to this private entity, this is information that all of us in the Tobago House of Assembly, me being an assemblyman, should have been a part of that discussion, so that when people are asking me questions, I know the answers. I could defend it, with my chest, as they say. I could defend it, but I am not able to do that because we simply do not know. What is the agreement? What is the agreement? Because we recognize, if we go back to this discussion about sandals, for example, a couple of years ago, the issue with sandals was there were several issues. One, the location, because again, the environmentalists kicked up a storm. I know that they tried to blame the PDP for sandals not coming, but we were really just listening to the people on the ground who voted for us to speak up for them. The environmentalists were talking about the location and that kind of thing. But then when we finally saw the MOU, and again, to even get the MOU, it was because Mr. Afro Raymond had to actually take the government to court. And then we started seeing the fine print and we realized, wait, hold up. We thought this was going to benefit us and maybe peripherally it would benefit us. But when we talk about real deep down benefit, I am not sure that we would benefit the way we should. That is where we decided, okay, we really need to rethink this deal because it's not really working in our favor. Is the same thing in place for this new hotel? We do not know. We do not know. Now, the other thing that is critical is the fact that there seemed to have been a whole lot of central government involvement. Let me put it that way, as politely as I can. Central government involvement in this deal. I am almost confident, I am almost positive that my other colleagues on the other side in the Tobago House of Assembly were also not a part of this discussion. And if we are talking in Tobago about getting greater autonomy for the Tobago House of Assembly, for the island of Tobago, it is amazing that we can have a whole situation where a whole hotel was given a whole piece of property in Tobago, and those of us in authority in Tobago don't have that information or weren't aware of it.
Well, let me add to that. Let me add to that, because we're not just talking about, because most people, when they think about hotels, they might think about a hotel that they stayed at. Maybe not a small 10-room operation, but, you know, this is a 200-room operation. This is something similar to the size of Magdalena. This is not just a small thing that they're going to put on a little piece of rock somewhere and call that George. This is a huge undertaking similar to what Sandals is going to be. And that's just your room count. We don't know what the layout would be, what the actual amount of land space that they're going to take up, the footprint. But with regards to the central government's involvement, and I could be wrong, so, you know, if anybody wants to call in later and correct me, that's fine. But I believe that there's a hotel near where I live that's right next to Hilton Trinidad, right underneath its shadow, that was built by, let's just say, property developers, you know, construction people. And they had a property and they tried to operate it, and things weren't necessarily going well. So they sold it off to, I believe, Marriott Bricks, the same group that's operating here. And they made a big press conference with regards to they're going to renovate it and reopen it. And Minister of Tourism, I believe, was there. And I didn't necessarily understand what was the big deal with regards to the government, because this is essentially a hotel that has been operating before. You're just renovating it. How is this going to be a major coup for the tourism sector? And I think it goes back to when they used to tout the cruise ship visitation numbers. Now, anybody that really looks into it knows that the amounts of money we made off of cruise ship visitations as an industry, exactly, both in Tobago and Trinidad. So they touted the numbers until they realized nobody's falling for it, and then they stopped. So the Minister of Tourism, I honestly am not entirely sure. And to be fair, outside of his predecessor, I don't know if anybody remembers the past ministers of tourism of this country. Let's just be real. Oil has always been the golden child, and tourism has always been the red-headed stepchild when it comes to our economy. But we have this situation now. Now, the only person that has given me any sort of plausible explanation for this is the head of the Tourism and Hotel Association, where he says that in order to get American business, we need more rooms to encourage more flights. That's a reasonable argument that I still have a hard time accepting, because I've seen this before from the government. That was why we have Magdalena. I literally remember somebody told me the plan for Tobago tourism at the time was to renovate Tobago Hilton and Magdalena. That was the plan. Step 1, renovate Magdalena. Step 2, Magdalena. That was it. That was the complete plan.
And it didn't bring the tourists.
And exactly. And there seems to be this thing, oh, we'll just build things and tourists will come. Meanwhile, could anybody tell me the catchphrase of Tobago or even Trinidad tourism that we sell, you know, come to Jamaica and feel all right. There's never a dull moment in Barbados. You know, like, why do I know these things, but we don't even have one? We don't even have one. I'm sorry, the frustration with regards to the tourism sector, because it's personal to me and my family, is there. My father's been in this industry for years. as one of the people in the industry for years, and the lack of any sort of planning, infrastructure, logistics. Apparently, they used to have it in the past, and then from the 80s, it just dwindled away. So,
but even if you look at I agree that we need more rooms. I totally agree.
Fair enough.
But if you look at the trajectory or at the way the world is going now, more people, unless the kinds of rooms that you are offering are ridiculously high end, Dubai, $10,000 a night kind of room. The way tourists seem to be going right now is that they actually prefer the bed and breakfast kind of thing. They prefer the inclusion into the communities kind of thing, that very natural way of experiencing the community that you are going to. So you're not going to go to a grand scale hotel and just be within the hotel, but you would go to a village bed and breakfast, or a small, thing like that. And, we have a very good model that I call the Castara model in Tobago, where the entire village of Castara is a hotel in essence. And there are many, many years where if you were looking at the tourist numbers in Tobago, the arrivals and so forth, if there were 10,000 people, let's just say, coming to Tobago for a period, 9,000 of those were going to Castara. And they came on the airport and they went all the way to Castara. They spent their week or 2 weeks in Castara and then went back to the airport because they are involved in the community. They are part of everything that was happening in Castara. And if the idea is for us to have additional room stocks, maybe we should consider doing room stocks like that, where we don't have a huge plant with 200 rooms or 500 rooms or whatever, but we have a smaller plants embedded within the various villages and so forth. And tourists could come, so they know that they are going to Castara, or they're coming to Belgarden, or they're going to wherever, and they are going to get the Tobago experience. I think that may be a better idea, given how the tourists, how the travelers seem to want to experience nature or culture right now. So this plant is thing. And going back to the thing about election ploy, in January, just before the last THA election, and it's so coincidental that we're doing this again, just before the last THA election, there was a big hoopla. Again, we got up one morning, saw that there was a big tent, saw that there were decorations at a location, saw that there was the Minister of Tourism and the Prime Minister, and all of these people were in Argyle, which is an area that is very close to me, maybe 2-3 minutes drive away from me, in January, saying that we were going to do a whole hoopla, a hotel again then. We've heard absolutely nothing about it since. So it's really, really coincidental, unfortunately, that we are doing this again just before another Tobago House of Assembly election. And I'm thinking I am actually beginning to feel insulted, because I'm beginning to think that they think that we are all just stupid. So you could do the same thing over and over again, and we would be fine. We would accept it. Such is life, and we would vote for you again. To me, that is so insulting.
That's the irony, because you had Sandals. And again, like you, I am very much questioning any sort of benefit that would have come from Sandals, because in my opinion, and it's not a particularly strong one, but in my opinion, or rather I'm not necessarily cemented in it quite so strongly. Not only would the source of labor to say that Sandals would bring jobs to the island, and I wasn't too sure about that, right? How much jobs would it actually bring? How much,
and sustain jobs.
Exactly. And not just entry-level basic jobs as well, right? But also the customer base of Sandals. They will bring tourists to the island, yes, who will then go to Sandals, who will then eat at Sandals, who will then participate in whatever dive activities and water sports at Sandals. What about the local dive operators, the local restaurants, the local lunch places, the local boats, the local tours? Probably all going to be handled by Sandals. So that was that. Now we're on the third hotel. And I do think, because the situation in Cascade, they have continue the renovations, I do think this hotel probably will be built, or has a better chance of being built sooner than the Argyle project, let's just say. But why now? Why put the effort there now? I think to some extent we do need to solve the how do we get people to come to Tobago on a consistent basis, you know? Now, the tourism minister said they're looking to have direct flights from Tobago to New York and hope to have tourists coming from New York. Now, first of all, I know that there was a direct flight before.
I have been on direct flights from Tobago to New York. So when he said that, I thought, wait, hold up. I kind of remember going from JFK directly to Tobago on Sundays. Why are we behaving as if that has never happened? Why are we behaving as if this is novel? I remember doing that. So, you know, what are we talking about? Is it that he really did not know that? And if he did not know that, then we have a bigger issue.
I hate to say this, but given what I have seen from politicians, I'll just say politicians, over the last 6 years, you could figure it out which part I mean. Well, given what I've seen from ministers, from certain portfolios, there are some ministers who, they're on the ball. They're on the P's and Q's. Cool. I appreciate that. I really do. And then there are other ministers who seem to not even understand the portfolio that they've been entrusted with. Now, granted, he's new to it, but honestly speaking, a basic thing like that, and I've seen this before at the start of the last term with someone who was new to his portfolio when they now came into office. You've been there for a year to 6 months, 6 months to a year. Like, there's certain basic things you need to know.
You need to know. But, you know, I think the bigger issue, though, and let's just say everything, all of the questions that we have asked, the answers are answers that we could live with, or the answers are answers that would work for us. I think that after doing such a big hoopla this week, we should have known the answers to those questions. And that is, to me, the bigger problem. Why is it that after you had such a big hoopla, we still don't know? We still don't know whether you've gotten, you know, EMA clearance and all of that stuff. We still don't know. And that was the problem with Sanders. We didn't know. If you had just given us the information when we asked for the information back then, we would have been fine. And it seems like we're going down the same road again. But sadly, and I'm actually looking at how my colleagues on the other side are speaking about this. It is clear that they don't have the information either. It is quite clear that they don't have the information, which goes back to my bigger point. If this is a cabinet project, then their colleagues in Tobago should have been way more vocal to ensure that this was a Tobago project and not a cabinet project. Because I promise you that when it was over London's regime in Tobago and Mrs. Kamla Persad-Bissessa's regime in Trinidad, if Kamla had tried with her cabinet, had tried something like this, it would have been all mass in Tobago. It would have been all mass in Tobago. So it's so hypocritical for them to have been very, and some of them who are there now were there then. It is very hypocritical for them to accept this now, knowing that they don't have the information, knowing that this goes against everything that we've been talking about for the last couple of years as it relates to autonomy in Tobago.
Exactly.
And still continue down the road with it simply because it is your party in Trinidad and you have to answer to them. And that, I think, is what Tobagonians need to look at, because I can promise you, and I don't make promises very frequently, especially political promises, but the PDP will have none of that when we win the THA. And
I will say this, when it comes to autonomy, this is one of the issues where it's clear. You can't have someone managing tourism in Tobago from an office in Port of Spain.
Exactly.
Because it's very different. And as a Trinidadian, I need other Trinidadians to understand that only benefits will come if we as a nation, and Tobago in particular, but also Trinidad as well, figure out our tourism product or products. We have 2 islands. We could differentiate them a little bit if we need to, right? But we figure out our products, and the first group of people that will benefit from a stronger tourism product in Tobago would be Trinidad. The first group. So it's within our interest that it's not turned into a mess, I hate to say this, but it slowly devolved into a mess from my memories over the last 40 to 50 years. Well, sorry, not from my memories. I'm not alive that long, but from the last, actually, yeah, well, 30 years, from the 80s till now. So, you know, it is something that could earn the nation foreign exchange if done correctly. Other island nations depend on it. We haven't had to yet. We take it for granted. And because we take it for granted and are complacent, we see what happens.
Exactly. Unfortunately, we continue to suffer as a result of it, unfortunately.
So just for the viewing public, how is COVID going on in Tobago? And is there any concerns that Delta has reached your shores?
Well, I don't know that we've had any official cases of Delta, but remember, they're only doing sample testing to determine what variants we have. They are not testing every sample. But I am sure that we do have Delta in Tobago. And when you look at the numbers in Tobago are going in the absolute wrong direction. I did an analysis for earlier in the week where we looked at the number of deaths in Tobago just for this month. We're talking about September. And the number of deaths we had in Tobago for September was equivalent to 3 or 4 times the number of deaths we've had nationally for that same period. I mean, that's something.
I mean, the interesting thing or the unfortunate thing, I don't even know how to really describe it. Nationally, the death rate has dropped ever so slowly, but we've reached a much better point. I'm not going to say good, but a much better point than where we were in June or April, in June or May.
May, yeah.
But now we have confirmation that Delta is here, and I'm just wondering, you know, are public health measures going to hold up? Are vaccination rates going to hold up? Is the situation in Tobago going to hold up? Because that's the thing. As Trinidad was slowly getting better, in some cases not getting better, just staying where it was, and Tobago's getting worse. Like, do we even understand why these things are happening and what could be done to rectify it? Because I hate to say this, and a lot of people, they come down on the Prime Minister and the government and other officials for being preachy to the public. But I am concerned that public complacency of the average person on the street, apparently there are people who don't even want to believe Delta exists. So, you know, we're not out of the woods yet, and if people aren't careful, you know, I don't know if we could go into another lockdown. I don't know if we could take mandatory vaccinations.
Well, we have to figure out how to live with this. And Tobago has to do the hard work of one, really looking at what is the cause of why we are where we are. I understand, and it may not have been public knowledge, but I understand that the Ministry of Health some time ago was actually so concerned about the direction that Tobago was going that they actually did an investigation, and there was a full report highlighting everything that was going wrong in Tobago. Now, the sad thing is, again, because of politics, because of I don't know what, instead of embracing that report, instead of making it public, instead of saying this is what we found out, this is what we're doing about it, it's being swept under the rug, and we're just continuing like normal. We are continuing like normal. Some days in Tobago, we have infection new case rates of 30 and 40 people in Tobago now. When you think about that in terms of numbers, you may say coming from Trinidad, 30 and 40 is not plenty what you're talking about. But if you do the comparative analysis, 30 and 40 new cases in Tobago is equivalent to 800 and 900 and 1,000 cases in Trinidad a day. That is what it is equivalent to when you look at the population size of Tobago versus Trinidad. So it is something to be very concerned about. And it's like we are burying our heads in the sand. We are not taking this seriously. We are not looking at the report that was done by the Ministry of Health and actively implementing the recommended changes. I get the calls all the time from the medical professionals, from the patients, from, oh my goodness, we are just not doing what we should do. And because of it, our cases in Tobago and unfortunately our deaths are going up instead of at, I would not have mind if we had even started plateauing, because after plateau, we expect to go down a little bit. No, we are still heading up, which just does not make sense.
Well, I mean, this is just one more chapter in the ongoing saga of our response to the pandemic. And I don't know what else to say. It's very concerning that this is happening now. And I'm hoping that some sort of measure, or even just sheer blind luck, might intervene, God, something. Because the last thing we want to hear is the situation, given the fact that we are technically under strict public health measures, is getting further out of control.
Yeah,
but
certainly.
Dr. Israel, your doctorate is in public health, so I hope people that hear you will understand that you're not just speaking as a politician who doesn't know what she's talking about. You might have a little bit more insight than the rest of us. So heed the doctor's words, and I'd like to thank you for your contribution today.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's amazing that everything that I learned at school is actually playing out in front of my eyes right now. It's a good thing, but it's not great when you're suffering that kind of thing that's happening as a result of it. So yeah, definitely, please follow the rules. Wash our hands, wear your mask, social distance. If you're home, if you're feeling sick, stay home. And please, yes, go out and get vaccinated. The vaccines are safe and they are working, and we need to use all of those measures collectively for us to make this thing.
Thank you, Dr. Israel.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we'll take a short break. When we come back, I'll just get into one quick story before news on the hour. Stay tuned. You're watching Talking Point.